What is up again, everybody? It is everybody's favorite, I don't want to do the intro, but we'll switch up the intro. It is everybody's favorite alternative prince, TenTillDeath. And today we got a very serious topic. I'm not in the face paint or the makeup as I normally am. I mean, I got the nail polish. I have very light makeup. I know you guys can hardly see it because I just hardly did it today. But today we're going to be talking about how psychology changed my life for both the better and the worse. And I know you probably read that title and you're thinking to yourself, TenTillDeath, there's no way psychology can change your life for the worse. But I will tell you this, before I get into the meat of this discussion, I spent the last year looking at online forums to see if anyone had these same thoughts that I had, about psychology, and if it made them think a certain way. And, surprisingly, there was a lot of people that held those same thoughts and those same perspectives, after, learning a lot of psychology or becoming a psychology student or becoming a therapist, so on and so forth. And so I know I'm not alone in talking about this, but I don't know if I've ever seen any YouTube videos talk about this. But we're going to talk about it today. So, how psychology changed my life for the better and the worse. And for the better part, it's going to be very short because there's not much to unpack there. But I'll basically started off like this. It was 2022. Me and my ex-fiance, we split up. I've talked about it on this channel a million times before. It is what it is. Past, behind, right? And I remember after that splitting, went through self-harm. I was dealing with a lot of mental issues up here and stuff, and alcohol addiction, so on and so forth. And I remember after that breakup, I was looking for answers. I was looking for guidance. There was so many things I was looking for, and I was looking to find myself. And I remember at that time, I really got out of my comfort zone. I really started going outside, socializing a lot more. I started breaking some internal boundaries, which is good, It's always good to break some internal boundaries that you possess. But for me, it was a very beautiful thing because, years of social anxiety, and sometimes social anxiety kicks in sometimes, but years of social anxiety that was preventing me from wanting to do a lot of things and, insecurities, I was able to break, the majority of those boundaries and finally get out of my comfort zone and get to experience life. And so then that's when psychology came in. I remember reading a lot of therapy books that were written by, licensed therapists. A lot of psychology books written by a lot of licensed psychologists. I have a ton on my bookshelf at home. And at the same time, I remember getting counseled. We're going from 2022 to 2023 here as I speak about this. So in 2023, I remember getting counseled, attending therapy. And I remember doing all of this studying, learning all of these things, and then even taking free college courses about mental health at the time before I decided to enter college. And it was very eye-opening. It was kind of like, for the longest time, you want to know the answers to everything, right? You're wondering why someone hurt you. You're wondering why this happens. You're wondering why that happens. And for me, it was finally like understanding the answers to everything. It's finally like seeing a door unlocked. A door that you could never open, right? And you've always wanted to know what was behind that door. And you finally got to unlock it. And that's what that was like for me. And so for me, being able to understand how I work mentally up here, why, I possess these certain qualities, why I think a certain way, why I get angry when someone says this, why I feel anxious all the time, why I feel scared and nervous at times. Finally being able to understand why I had these things all these years, that was how it was very beneficial for me, because once I finally understood why, social anxiety, once I finally, it wasn't even just that, it was awareness. For years, I didn't really realize it was social anxiety. For years, I didn't realize it was insecurity issues, that were plaguing my mind, affecting my relationships and stuff, right? And once I finally understood that stuff, I was finally able to move on with my life and mostly, work towards moving on and making myself better. And I remember my ex-fiance, when I was with them, they were telling me, they were like, Tin, you got to go to therapy. You're clearly traumatized from some of the stuff you told me. And I remember not believing them, not really thinking about it, and kind of just brushing it off. And then once I started studying psychology and stuff, it was really eye-opening. So, that's the way, benefited me for the better. It opened up a lot of doors to understanding myself. And there's nothing wrong with that, It's always good to understand yourself, because there's a lot of times where you're depressed, you're sad, you're going through the motions of life, and you're just trying to make sense of the situation. And then a lot of times you end up losing yourself, and then you try to find out who you really are. And then once you understand who you are, it's beautiful. Once you understand how all the mechanisms of your brain works, of you personally, your soul self, then it's beautiful, because then you know what your true strengths are, you know what your true weaknesses are. And understanding that is a great thing. So now, the question is, how did it affect me for the worse? And that's what a lot of you guys have probably come here for. You guys are probably thinking, Tin, that's crazy. There's no way it could have ruined your life. Like now that you have, these fundamental keys to understanding all of these things, there's no way that, it could ruin your life like that, right? But I cannot remember the exact verse in the Bible. But there's a verse in Ezekiel. No, not Ezekiel. There's a verse in the book of Ecclesiastes where it said, with more knowledge comes more grief, or mostly around those lines. And when you understand what that line means, you understand why such a simple line is so profound and powerful. Because even when you have more knowledge on life, there is going to be more grief. And that's with psychology, right? When I learned how the brain worked, when I learned about how trauma affects people, like it was crazy. It wasn't just one thing that I studied. I could not tell you the different subjects in psychology that I studied, studying the, effects that happen to rape victims mentally, age regression, depression, how addictive behaviors, become a thing, all sorts of stuff, right? All sorts of different subjects and just topics in that field, right? When I started to study these things and I started to know the answers to why people in this world act the way they do, why people hurt others. And for some people, it's a different situation depending on how they got to that point. And then understanding that a lot of what happens to you when you are a kid will carry over into your adult life. And a lot of times you won't even be aware of it. And then just knowing that a lot of people are just not aware of the behaviors they exhibit. It was really eye-opening, right? It was more so like, holy shit, now I can understand people better. Now I can understand why these people that hurt me say these things to me, right? I can understand some people, might have not actually meant it, but then I can understand for some people it's a control tactic, right? But this is where it ruined my life. When I finally began to understand how everybody was, I tried to treat everybody accordingly, right? And this is not inherently a bad thing. It's not inherently bad to say, okay, I became a little nicer towards people. I decided to treat people with a lot more kindness. There's nothing inherently bad about saying that. But here's where the issues start to come in. Now knowing why people exhibit all these behaviors, why people do all these things, I was trying to treat people accordingly. I was trying to treat, people that had trauma. I tried treating them, a lot kinder. I tried to be a lot more considerate towards them, just to not, make their issues worse. There's very mean people that, I understood from just talking to them how they might have got to, this point where they just treat everybody like shit. And I tried to treat them differently. I tried to treat them with a lot more respect, try to, just talk to them about things. But this is the issue that you run into. When you finally know the answers to why everybody in this world acts the way they do, and how, trauma from when you were a kid can affect you in your adulthood and can affect your relationships in the long run. You begin to understand you cannot help everybody. And that was the thing, I tried to help everyone. I tried to work around everyone. And that's the thing, you cannot. And here's why you cannot. There's gonna be people that will want to take advantage of you. And you just want to help them. You just want to see people get out of these, you want to see people break through their trauma issues, right? But then that you also understand when you try to help people that are going through a traumatic experience or are dealing with those side effects, a lot of those people will try to develop attachment to you, and then they'll try to get romantically involved with you, but then you're not looking for a romantic relationship. And then what was once a beautiful friendship can devolve into a very ugly thing, because now, you don't like me like that, but you also know that they don't have romantic feelings for you. They think they have romantic feelings for you, but you know they were just looking for someone at that point, express their grief to, right? And so that's like just even one issue. Or like issue two, you try to be a lot more considerate towards people with physical disabilities, and you try to work around them. And this is in the workplace. Good example here in the workplace. You try to work around them because you know how it's messing with them mentally. You know how it's making them feel mentally. You know it probably makes them feel insecure inside. You know it probably just hits them in the back of their head all the time, every day. And so you try to work around them at work, but you end up almost costing yourself your job, because now you're not meeting productivity, right? You're not meeting those productivity rates. Or there's a lot of people who tend to get drawn to you because, okay, you're this fountain of wealth. You're this fountain of knowledge, right? And there's a lot of people going through the motions of life, and they're looking for answers, and they get drawn to you. And now there's a lot of people that try to, pull you back and forth. And so there's going to be a lot of people that take advantage of you, and you're going to have to learn that you cannot just be super nice to everybody. And that's the hardest fucking thing that I've had to learn recently. You cannot be super nice to everybody. Yeah, you understand why they're doing these things. Yeah, you understand this person is just getting attached to you because they're looking for someone that actually cares while they're going through this traumatic experience. You understand why this person sees you as a father figure when they're age regressing, right? You understand why these people always want to spend time with you and why they're so drawn to you, but it can get so tiring real quick. And on the other hand, it kind of makes you feel like you're like an idol of worship. And, a lot of people are like, wow, I'd love to have like a following like that. No, it fucking sucks. It fucking sucks because, you want to spend more time with yourself. You want to spend more time at home relaxing, then you have to put down people. And a lot of people take it personal. Unfortunately. And that's not even the other thing why I'd say psychology kind of ruined my life. Besides, trying to work around everyone. And it's not to say you can't treat people with a lot more kindness and respect and a lot more compassion and consideration. It's to say you also got to remember who you are as a human being. You got to remember your own interests. You got to remember, your boundaries you set. You got to remember what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you not feel comfortable. And you got to remember your own time management and what you're willing to put up with. But it's also kind of like, dang, I just had this in my head and I forgot. But it's also, trying to logic your way out of pain. Okay, good example. Now you know psychology, right? Now you know how trauma works. You know how depression works. You know how all these things work. So you say to yourself, okay, now that I know these things, now that I know how depression works, now that I know methods to deal with depression, now that I know how addictions work, if I ever, fall victim to depression or addictions again, I can easily get out of that. No, you might have a little bit of a clutch, but the fact of the matter is you're still a human being. Just because you possess all of this knowledge on how the brain works doesn't make you any less than a human being. Yeah, you might know some new coping techniques, but the fact of the matter is you're still a human being. You're going to get hurt too. And the fact, it's not even just that, even when you have all this psychological knowledge, you try to make sense of everything. You try to make sense of every situation. You try to make sense of why this person hurt you, and you end up hurting yourself in confusion. And it's true. You end up hurting yourself in confusion. You go through another heartbreak, and then you try to make sense of it. You're like, oh, from understanding these things that I studied in class not too long ago about, dating psychology and stuff, it only makes sense why me and this person split up with each other. How can I be mad? And then a few days later, you're in your room crying. And a few days earlier, you're like, how could I be mad? I understand why this happened. I mean, this is what I studied in class. But here you are a few days in your room crying because, like I said, at the end of the day, you're a human. You cannot make sense of every situation. You cannot make sense of every time someone hurts you. And that's a hard one to grasp. I know you're trying to use all of these different things you learned in psychology class for why this person hurt you. Oh, they hurt you because, they think of you as, their abuser from their past. And so that's why they hurt you. Or, oh, they hurt you because of this reason or because of that reason. But the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of mean-spirited people out there, and I've kind of come to terms with you cannot help everybody. You cannot help a lot of these mean-spirited people. A lot of them, and I've learned this the hard way, where you try to talk to them, you try to get them to open up, and a lot of them just will not, and that's okay. Stop trying to help everybody, man. You're hurting yourself. You're getting yourself in a bad, depressive mood because that person you try to help, who's a mean-spirited individual, just yelled at you because you were trying to, figure out some things about them, right? And that's not to say you can't help them. It's not to say you can't help them, but you have to learn how it's affecting yourself. So the other way how it ruins your life is you try to make sense of everything, and you cannot make sense of everything, and you cannot make sense of every situation, every good thing, every bad thing. You cannot. And the last thing I have to say about this topic is you try to justify everything. Now that you have all of this psychological knowledge on why abusers happen, why people commit terrorist attacks, why people yell at each other, why people, do all these negative, bad things in this world, you try to justify those things. Oh, that terrorist did those things because they were brainwashed, which, I mean, they probably were. I'm not going to lie, they probably were. Or, oh, this person yelled at you because they have issues from their childhood of dealing with, emotional parental abuse as a kid, and that's why they yelled at you, and you try to justify it, but deep down inside, that person hurting you, that person yelling at you hurts you inside, and you cannot justify these things. You cannot justify anything at all, no matter what. You cannot justify these things. You got to accept. There might be some contributing factors that cause people to do these harmful things, but at the end of the day, you got to accept you're a human being too, and they hurt you, man. They hurt you, and you cannot just let it go and be like, that's just their trauma speaking. No, I get it. It might be their trauma making them act that way. It might be, issues from a past abusive relationship that might be making them act that way. But at the end of the day, they are still hurting you, and that's what you need to understand. But there is one more thing I'm going to add to this video. And this is how we're going to end it off. The world becomes a lot darker once you study psychology. The world becomes a lot darker. You cannot look at things the same once you study psychology. On one hand, things become a lot more beautiful. Things do become a lot more beautiful, but things also become a lot more dark for you. Once you understand the psychological profiles of abusers, of abuse victims, of rape victims, so on and so forth, a lot of times you can just look at those people and you can know everything they've gone through just from looking at them, just from a few things they told you. And then you see it all in your head. You vision it all in your head. and it's very dark, and you tell yourself, I'm like, oh my God, I don't like these thoughts. I don't like knowing, I don't like having to imagine that this person went through all of this stuff and they didn't even tell me that they went through all this stuff. I just know based on these things that they're exhibiting, based on these things they're telling me, based on, these fears that they have. And everything just becomes a lot darker. A lot of times you'll look at a kid that's getting hit in public and you probably know what's going on behind the scenes, and it's just very, very fucking dark. And for me, everything just became dark. When I learned psychology, besides the fact that it helped me, everything became a lot more dark. I tried to justify a lot of bad things. Oh, this is someone's trauma speaking. But at the end of the day, I had to understand these people still treated me like trash, man. And that's when you have to say, okay. That's when you have to put your foot down and actually start to stand up for yourself, And so this is kind of the situation where I've kind of got into the last few months. When I came back to my second shift at my job, because I worked on second shift last year. Layoffs happened, so they moved me to day shift. And then when I could finally come back to night shift, I came back to night shift. I came back to night shift. There was a lot of rudeness and crudeness for me. And there was a lot of rudeness and crudeness for me on day shift. But when I came back to night shift, it was a lot more blunt. It was a lot more in my face. Whereas on day shift, it was on the minimal. And so I remember having a lot of discussions with a lot of people older than me. And even though I knew why all of these mean things were happening, all of these mean fucking spirited motherfuckers were being a bitch to me when I came back to second shift, I had to put all of this psychological knowledge aside, man, because it was just fucking hurting me. And I had to, after all these talks with the elders at work, I kind of had to realize, dude, I have to put my fucking foot down. And I hate to say it, but sometimes you gotta be a little bit mean back, because there's some people, it doesn't matter how kind you treat them, it doesn't matter how much you care for them, they just will treat you like fucking shit, man. And so once I kind of began to understand, I had to put my foot down a lot more and be a lot more blunt. And yeah, I know it's gonna hurt their fucking feelings, but if they're over here disregarding my feelings, why should I care? I understand, okay, they had a rough upbringing. I've had a rough upbringing too, man. But you're fucking with me, and that's not cool. You're essentially bullying me in the workplace, and that shit's not cool. And I'm not gonna go down without a fight these days if I'm getting bullied. Whereas in the past, if I got bullied, I would just let it happen. And that's the thing. You gotta stand on your business. You gotta remember your own mental well-being. So if it means you have to be mean to a motherfucker who's being mean to you just to get him to shut the fuck up and leave you alone, sometimes you have to, man. And that's how it is here in the adult world. Even when you possess all this psychological knowledge, you cannot help everybody. Some people you're going to have to be mean to, but there's some people you can be there, you can help them during that time, and you can have a nice long relationship with. So until next time, this has been TenTillDeath. Peace.